Hi, everybody. This is Kofi Kankam, one of the co-founders of MidAdvantage, and we're with obviously Beat the GMAT. So thank you for taking time out of your busy day. I know a lot of you are probably taking your afternoon naps right now. I'm joking, hopefully. But today we're going to talk about sort of what to do before you hit submit. And that is a literal question, but it's also sort of just a metaphor in the sense of all the things that you need to do to get yourself ready before you actually submit your application. And then there'll be a part 2 later on where we talk about what you do after you sort of submit your application. But today we're going to talk on how you can sort of get yourself ready, how you can prepare for the process that you're about to engage in. As many of you know, applications will become live probably in late May, early June. In the last 6 to 7 years, it's gone earlier and earlier and earlier, but I don't think we're going to see any live applications prior to mid-May, okay? But now is the time we should be gearing up, thinking about things, and making sure you're ready, especially for those of you that are applying round 1, to get all your ducks in order so you can really have a successful candidacy. So let's talk a little bit about it today. You'll note that all of you are on mute. That's not because we don't want to hear your beautiful voices. It's really just because of sort of the audio feedback. There'll be plenty of time for a Q&A on the back end. If you have a really pressing question, type it in, and I'll try to get to it during the course of the presentation. But otherwise, if you can just hold your questions, just jot them down. We'll try to get to all the ones that we can in the next hour. Okay. So a little bit about us, just so you feel comfortable. We know what we're talking about. We're basically we're on Beat the GMAT all the time. So if you don't know us, you're not on Beat the GMAT. But I'll just aside, we're basically a admissions consulting company. So we help candidates from all over the world, typically about a dozen countries a year, get into business school. In terms of the 3 core tenets of our company, it's really experience. So all those sort of ones from top-tier school, we've all gone through a lot of training. Most of us are sort of on admissions in some capacity. There's a huge focus on sort of, being close to our clients, helping them, servicing them, and making sure that they feel taken care of. We do free consultations up till 11:30 p.m. about 4 or 5 nights a week. We do weekends, so we know this is a really important time in your life, and sometimes you have questions or concerns that aren't necessarily confined to the business hours, and also, obviously most of the jobs as well. So you can't really do this at work. That's why a lot of you are sort of hiding out in back rooms, which we know about, and performance. That's the last core tenet. So we've been really fortunate to have, I think, a really good sort of set of procedures and a good program, but also really good candidates, right? So not necessarily candidates who have everything together and everything perfect, but all of our candidates work really hard. And that's kind of something we demand from our people. And we've been really fortunate, them and us collectively, to have really strong representation in all the top-tier schools in the world. And this is really just a subset of it. So whether it's Columbia or Kellogg or Wharton, Harvard, Stanford, INSEAD, LDS, we've been really fortunate in getting people in to some of the top universities globally, and we expect that trend to continue this year. My background, so I'm one of the founders, so 2 of us have founded the company. We have about 36, 37 consultants, most of which are up on our website. Basically, my background is in technology and education and entrepreneurship. So I worked at Accenture in the telecom group. I worked at Nextphone, which is sort of a predecessor to Skype. I also had a company prior to this one, which I sold as part of the Wharton Venture Initiation Program, which is for entrepreneurs on campus. My educational background is I did an undergraduate degree in Harvard College, excuse me, with a major in neurobiology. I stayed and pursued a graduate degree from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and then my MBA is from Wharton, where I was really fortunate to receive a $50,000 a year fellowship, $50,000, sorry, in total fellowship. And I ran Wharton's largest student-run conference, the Whitney Young Conference, and I also TA'd a first-year marketing core class. Eric Allen is my partner, very similar background, but actually better than mine. They always tell you work with smarter people. He went to Brown. He served as a Wharton and Brown alumni interviewer. We met at Wharton, where he was a Twigo Fellow, which was a full ride at the time, and did pretty well academically. Our consultants, which you can see at midadvantage.com/consultants, they're phenomenal people, good people. I mean, good people, also great background. Lots of great companies represented, and firms like McKinsey and Google and the UN and Goldman, GE, et cetera. and they're alums of all the top-tier schools, all the dream schools. Even though a lot of you may not seek to attend those schools, we just kind of believe in having some of the top people who have gotten into the top schools, the Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Kellogg, et cetera, on our team, because those people have a lot of experience getting themselves into top-tier schools and really selective schools as well as helping candidates get into those schools. Okay? So that's it. That's it on us. Anything more, you can check out the website. Let's get to the meat of it. So let's talk about how you plan, okay? And these are the things you should be doing. Right now, we are in the pre-application phase, okay? Applications are not out. What you should be doing is finalizing your decision to go to business school. Some of you have danced around this decision for some time. Some of you decided, quote unquote, or thought about going to school, at the turn of the year. You thought it'd be a really good thing for you to focus on this year in terms of, applying this year and matriculating next year, next fall. You need to crystallize your decision. That decision involves some sacrifice. So that means you're going to be sacrificing, potentially going out in order to start your GMAT. You're going to be sacrificing vacation in order to sort of pay for your applications and pay for, test prep. You're going to have to, think about the projects you take at work. Maybe you're volunteering a little bit more now to take on hard projects so you can free up a little bit in the fall. But you need to sort of mentally get to the place where you realize that if you're going to apply and be successful applying to top 20, top 30 schools, you need to sort of start making steps now. Okay? This is also when you should be thinking about your school selection. So you should be doing things like visiting schools, going on their chat rooms. If you go to different cities, if you're flying to Chicago and for work and you're thinking about applying to school, go to Northwestern, go to DePaul, go to University of Chicago, visit campus, etc. Okay, it's also time clear when you should be thinking about taking your GMAT. So the GMAT is something that is much easier to handle when it's the only thing you have to do in your application process. We see too many candidates who look to take their GMAT while they're working on their application, while they're working, and oftentimes it doesn't go well. So, you really want to focus on, your timing for an MBA. What is the reason why you want an MBA, okay? That's independent of any school application. You should be able to, if your parent asks you, or your best friend, or a partner says, why are you getting an MBA? You should be able to answer that independent of any kind of application itself, right? You need to be thinking about school fit, size, location, where the geographic place people, where they place people industry-wise and company-wise, the type of learning, cases, lecture study, experiential learning. You should start to be thinking about those kinds of decisions now. Urban, rural, obviously, right? GMAT we talked about, and this also we should be filling gaps. So you have no community service, start doing community service. You've got a terrible GPA, start taking some courses. You need to be doing that kind of stuff now, if you can, prior to starting your application. You'll then be moving to the application process itself, right? And so that is obviously also part of what you do before you hit submit. This is where you start to think about, okay, your strategy, right? You need to think about what are the critical stories and experiences and accomplishments, as well as the relevant leadership characteristics that will comprise your application. And your application has a couple of different pieces to the platform. You've got your essays, you got your resume, you have your recommenders, you have your interviews, and you also have the non-essay data portion. And so you need to think about these pieces, as you start to in this early stage, and in terms of focusing for the application process, you want to think about again those traits. If someone's reading your application, what do you want them to be? How do you want them to describe you? Maybe it's innovative, maybe it's a great communicator, able to make decisions with limited information, civically or community-minded. Those kinds of things, adaptive. Those kinds of things, it's not by chance that you're going to get in. You have to be very discerning and be very deliberate about how you move forward. Okay. When you think about those traits, you don't want to think about sort of the stories I mentioned, experience and accomplishments, which tell those traits, right? Which really tell your narrative. You all have heard you got to tell your story in your application. That's what it means. Finding specific things that are almost like anecdotes or fables into your canvassing, into your person that will help you get into school. And in telling those stories, you do want to think about how you differentiate yourself. You do want to think about how you show career progression and consistency. You do want to show depth outside of just your professional background, right? So you want to show things that you're doing outside of your job, things that make you an interesting person, things that show that you're going to contribute to your MBA community in a way beyond the classroom, outside the classroom. And then you also obviously want to think about, okay, what are some things that you can do to mitigate weaknesses, which I just alluded to before in terms of taking classes, and what are some activities or stories that you can really show that really accentuate your strength. Okay, this is what you should be, this is a grand sort of bucket of things that you need to be concerning yourself about now, in mid-April, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about the pre-application phase. So you've got sort of MBA decision, school fit, you've got self-assessment and taking action, kind of the virtuous circle. All right. So in this phase, the pre-application, you have to basically think broadly. You've got to think widely, right? So you've got to be able to answer questions about your motivation for an MBA. It used to be the case, like in 03 or 4 or 5, that those were questions that were deliberately asked. Why do you want an MBA? Why do you want it from our school? Why do you want it now? Even though those questions aren't asked quite as much, you still need to be able to answer them, one, in the interview, but secondly, you probably want to bring it up and answer them in some of the questions. You want to weave that in, right? So how does an MBA fit for what you're looking to do going forward? What are the sort of the skill sets? What are the contacts? What are what's the credibility factor that you need in order to pursue your goal? Right? What's more important? What's most important? What are you looking to really derive from an MBA program? Why does it make sense for you to go now? So you're 3, 4 years out. Why should you go now versus being 5 years out? Maybe you're 10 years out of undergraduate school. Why does it make sense for you to go now? Even to go at all, right? And what are some of the things that you're looking to do immediately after school in the short term and the long term? What is it that you want to be doing for the first 3 to 7 years after you graduate, and then sort of 7+ years? You got to be thinking about this, right? And you shouldn't be waiting for an application. I mean, to me, if I were in your position, and I was in your position actually, I was thinking about this kind of stuff just to convince myself to actually go through this process, right? To tell my, before I sort of chunk down all this time and all this money on the application and sort of test prep and other things you may need to get help if you want admissions consulting, for example. But also just before I chunked away all that time paying for school, I had to make sure it was a good choice. And so you should be thinking about this stuff already independently of actually having it included in your application. You also in this phase want to think about sort of how you shape your strategy, right? So some of you, I mean, obviously most of us want to go to top tier schools, and I get that, right? But there's also sort of the competitive balance of, well, do you need to be in school next year, right? So if you want to be in, so if your goal is sort of Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, Columbia, Chicago, and that's it, you may not get into any of those schools. Is that okay with you? Or are you saying, look, I'd love to go to those schools, but honestly, I'm 29, I got a mortgage, I got a great idea for a business I want to start, I need to get an MBA, I need to be in and out for stuff, I want to get on with my life such that, you're going to start working, you're going to apply to other types of schools, including maybe some of the top tier ones. So you really got to balance your school choice with sort of, and your number of schools with sort of your sense of urgency, right? Are you a star shooter? Okay, if you're shooting for the stars, that's cool, but you got to manage your expectations, right? You have to be comfortable with the fact you may not get in. I mean, when I applied to school, give you an example, I basically applied to Columbia and Wharton, and my reason was because I felt like I did pretty good in college. I went to obviously an A-brand school. I had a girlfriend, at the time I was in New York, and I really didn't want to move out of this area because I was working on some entrepreneurial stuff. But I was also comfortable with the fact that, I get in, right, even though I had really good scores. So you've just got to make a decision as to what makes sense for you. And that's really a personal decision. I mean, we see candidates sometimes who have the same exact grades and work history and GMAT scores. And one candidate will say, I'm only applying to the top tier schools. And another candidate will say, I want to go to one of those schools, but I'm going to include other 25 through 30, 35 schools because I need to be in school next year. And so it just varies according to kind of who you are and what you need. And then we talked about this a little bit in terms of, finding schools that are the right fit for you based on a number of things. It's not just rankings. Rankings are important, but rankings also shift, right? I mean, a couple years ago, when I was in school, Wharton potentially was the #1, and then it fell out to the top 5, and now, they just came back. But that stuff's not super important as long as your school is at sort of the upper level. But even beyond that, many schools are sort of in that top 10 range. So now you can think, okay, if you have the credibility taken care of, what about the other stuff? the career focus, the ranking, if we just talked about, the size, learn culture, you know what I mean, learning style, all that stuff, geography. If it's in the woods, like Dartmouth, you want to be in an urban environment like Columbia, right? East Coast, West Coast. You've got to really weigh these factors and make sure that they fit in the best sense for you. At the same time, you need to realize also you're going as an adult. It's only 2 years of your life. And there's probably nothing, you can suck it up for 2 years too, right? So you've got to sort of figure out how much the personal preferences mean to you, and also sort of how you evaluate them or how you prioritize them, okay? You also want to make sure in this phase that you're sort of focusing on some minutia, focusing on details. You see a lot of candidates that they kind of do one or the other. Either go super big and figure out all the details, or they just focus on small ball stuff and never really take a look at the big picture thing, okay? But in this case, I want to make sure that I emphasize the need for you to go granular, meaning you need to basically look at your inventory, right? And I just got off the phone. I was telling Jennifer, who set this up, I was just getting off the phone with someone, and we were going through a consultation, a free consultation, and he had really high ambitions, and he had some things in his candidacy I didn't like, and he sort of wanted to gloss those over. I was saying, these are important things. Like, you've been through 3 or 4 jobs in the last 5 years. That's not something you can just gloss over. So make sure you're getting some kind of assessment about your candidates. So we offer free consultations. If you want them, that's the address. If it's not us, talk to someone who's in the know, okay? Think about your career. Make sure you're really looking at, have you been promoted? If not, get promoted if you can, right? Is there a story? Is there a progression? Are you seeing someone who's just jumping around? Can you explain your movement, okay? What sorts of skills have you picked up, or have you gleaned that are relevant towards your future goals? And it doesn't mean you have to be in the same industry. We've seen many, many qualified military candidates when they're going in the industry, whether it's aerospace, banking, marketing, and they could talk about skills like, managing a team, being great communicators, taking inventory, doing accounting, that kind of stuff that's relevant for their future jobs, soft and hard skills, okay? And then make sure that you're already you've been taking action towards the next step of your career. So you want to make sure that the admissions team members don't feel that you're kind of waiting to get into business school in order to sort of take steps towards your future, right? That's the worst thing you can do. I mean, you want them to feel like you've got a 10-step plan, or let's call it a 7-step plan. Business school is step 3. And you've already done step 1. You're working on step 2, whatever that step 2 is, okay? It's very important they feel like you understand. Even at an amazing school like a Wharton or Harvard or Stanford, one of those kinds of schools, it's just a school. Like, it's not going to plan out everything in your career. And there are many people who go to those schools and flounder. So just make sure that the admissions members feel that you respect what the school can bring, but you also know that you've got to bring something to the table, and you've got to be working on things as well, okay? You really need to be going through your academic history. This is, again, some of the minutia, right? So, we talk to people all the time and say, I want to go to Berkeley. I graduated 6 years ago. How did you do Berkeley? How did you do an undergrad? Not that great. Well, that's going to impact your ability to get in, right? So get your GPA, get your grades, see if they progress. You start low and finish high, right? For example, did you go the opposite, which is not good? Have you shown an ability to sort of really crunch numbers, which most business schools want you to do right now? I mean, we're moving to an era of a lot of data, and most business schools want to feel comfortable that you can run numbers. So, if you were an English major, and let's say you did well, but you've got no quantitative background, let's say you flounder a little bit on your GMAT, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble, right? You're going to have a little bit more pressure on you to do well on your GMAT, as opposed to the woman that majored in computer science who basically works at a bank, right? She's already shown the ability to sort of crunch numbers and deal with data, and so she doesn't have quite as much emphasis on her GMAT as you may. So you've got to keep these things in mind as you sort of work through your candidacy. And then you want to think about your impact assessment. What I mean by that is, what, in terms of your recommendations, what are they going to say about you in terms of your impact? Are they going to say, Stacy did an amazing job here, and she kind of changed our culture, or she had, her impact, her sort of efforts led to amazing deals, they hit our bottom line, et cetera, or is it going to be lighter, right? Really think about your impact. You've got to be honest. I mean, I should put on this slide, go granular and be honest. Don't gloss up this stuff. And you still can get in if you've got things that are bad, but you've got to know what you're working with. And if you work with a company like ours, we've got to know what you're working with so that we can actually really address the weaknesses. So be honest with yourself. You don't have to show everyone, but you've got to be clear kind of what are the strengths and what are the real weaknesses that you have. All right? You've got to focus on how you're being evaluated. So the GMAT is really important. The GRE too. I still shade it towards the GMAT. I think it's seen as a more rigorous exam. The quant section is harder in most business schools. It's kind of the standard at this point. I will say the GRE is closing that gap, but at this point, 2014, the GMAT is still the standard. Okay. Take a course. There are lots of good courses. We work with a Prince Review. If you don't like them, work with somebody else, right? But if you know that you're not a good test taker, and if you look back at your SATs and you know they didn't go well, or you have to prepare super hard, you're probably going to have to prepare super hard this time, especially those who are a couple years out of undergrad. You haven't taken an exam in a while. You've got the job, okay? Take the GMAT as soon as you feel ready. It's good for 5 years, right? So, you know, I know it stinks to think you're actually going to have to take it in the summertime, but it's actually usually a good time to take it for working people because usually your workload is reduced a little bit, right? When your boss is vacationing in the Hamptons or wherever he or she is going, this is a good time to buckle down, right? You should not be next to it. You should be studying and hitting your book, okay? Work on your academics. Get your transcripts. I alluded to that. If you have a challenging GPA for a top 20 school, I would consider that to be a 3.2 or below, 3.1, 3.2 or below. You've got to think about taking some courses in accounting, economics, stats, calculus, if you don't have that. You know, you can, if you've worked for a while, you certainly can, you can point to your work history and say, hey, look, I'm more competitive in the field of battle where it matters work, but your grades still matter. You're not running away from your grades. You just can't, right? Because after all, you are going back to an academic institution. So it's different. If you're applying for a new job, your grades probably wouldn't matter at all. But you are looking to go back to school, and they look at that, okay? And they crunch that for their numbers and how they'll rank. So, yeah, if you have a 2.9 in your dream school, Stanford, and you think, well, I graduated 9 years ago, it doesn't matter, think again, it does matter. It doesn't matter as much as someone that graduated 2 years ago, but you're going to need to do some things to address that, okay? Manage your career aggressively, right? And I say this especially for, you know, I'm going to be honest for you. You know, I see we have a lot of female candidates. We're so talented, and sometimes I talk to my wife about this. She's actually more talented than I am. Like, be aggressive. You got to get promoted, right? Push for promotion. A lot of times men do this. A lot of times women don't. People of color sometimes don't either. Just to let you know as well. So make sure you are managing for pushing promotion. Make sure you're working with your recommenders. Take them out for a beer. Go to that softball game you don't want to go to because you're going to ask your boss for recommendation. Do those things, okay? I would probably not switch jobs at this point if you're looking to apply this year. Now, I'm sorry, I wouldn't switch companies. If you can switch jobs within your company, that's different. You have, you know, you can still say, look, I got promoted. I'm in this new role. You can have your recommender can still be the same person saying, you know, John left and went to this new division, but he's doing great there, et cetera. But I probably wouldn't switch jobs at this point unless you're willing to apply in fall 2015, all right? Try to find opportunities in terms of building up skills, contacts, your story, which dovetail with your long-term opportunities, especially with your long-term dreams, especially with regard to your extracurricular activities, okay? And make sure you are doing well. You can't afford to slack in your job because you're working on your application. You got to run it out, run through the tape, just like a track star, okay? I know it's hard. I've been there. I've seen so many of our candidates do it. I understand what I'm asking you to do, but if you want to get into a top-tier school, this is what you need to do. This is what your peers are doing. They're successful, right? Look for community opportunities. So find your areas of interest, you know? Don't do things you don't want to do, but like if you can sort of find stuff which fits with what you want to do professionally, it's amazing. So we had a guy a couple years ago, I love telling the story. who wants to work for FIFA? FIFA is the soccer governing body globally, okay? That's his job. That's what he wants to do. Amazing job. That's the job I would do, actually. But he basically had the chance to, in the Pacific Northwest, he had a chance to organize, he started a soccer league, right? And they donated all the money to charity. So now he's got a league. They raise sponsorship dollars from local companies. He brought all these people together. It's like a great activity. It shows great leadership, great management, you know, it shows service to the community in terms of like raising money for charity, and it also fits with what he wants to do long term in terms of working in sports. That's kind of like the holy grail. That may not happen, right? That's like an eclipse. It happens very infrequently, but if you can do it, okay? If you work in finance or something that's time constrained, find discrete opportunities, okay? So do you like to have after humanity build a house in a weekend, right? Do a mentoring program which has to be, you know, a beginning, middle, and end. Do those kinds of things. If you're super duper busy, do volunteer work within the structure of your company. Oftentimes, you know, your company won't mind if you're doing something on their behalf. You'll be paid for it, right? In terms of that won't be, you know, you can do that during the week, maybe one day a month for some of these companies, and that'll be fine. You're not going to be penalized for that. It's like you're still working in the office. So those are some tips you can follow. Do things that people don't want to do, you know, in terms of making an impact. Raise your hand. Step forward and do things. This is in your job as well as sort of extracurricularly. You know, be unique. Find places where you can sort of really have an impact. That means you're going to have to do some things probably you don't want to do or that other people don't want to do. You're scared of. Do them, right? And then look to basically create your own opportunities for impact. All right? So advanced part structure and application. So, you know, even though applications not come out, you know, you can still think about what your short-term and long-term goals are. And we do some of this in the pre-application practice for our candidates. You should write that down, right? Craft a statement around that because you're probably going to need that for at least one of your schools, right? Think about the building blocks. So you've got short-term goals. What are the things you need to get done, right? What are some school items to help you and other items that you should be doing prior to school, right? What are clubs and organizations on campus and other things you're doing right now to help you achieve your long-term, your short-term goals? And then long-term goal blocks, think about this within school. Like, so what are the activities and the roles within your future MBA program that you're going to need in order to sort of really help you make that transition 5 to 7 years out from school? And, you know, I'll give you an example. So I've got a very good friend from school with me who wanted to become a real estate developer. He joined the real estate club on campus because, you know, even though he took a job working for someone he was done, he now, I think 8 years out, he left and formed his own company. And some of the initial people that he went to for money, for investment dollars, were basically friends of his from the real estate club at Wharton. And he did it, I mean, we talked about this when he was heading into school, right? These are people that are established. Some of them wanted to do something entrepreneurial, but they don't have the capacity to do it. And they said, yeah, we'll back you. We believe in you. We've known you for 10 plus years. Let's do it. And so you've got to start thinking about that kind of stuff, okay? Think about ways to address your weaknesses. That's why we like working with people early, because you don't want to be you don't want to be writing about your weaknesses, not having done anything to mitigate them, right? Think of your brand characteristics, as we talked about, and, you know, start to like lay things out, what you need to accomplish on a sort of monthly, quarterly, semi-annual basis, okay? All right, so we're going to get to questions in a minute. You know, applications will be coming out next month. I suspect it'll be closer to June, July, but yeah, could be wrong. Round 1 deadlines are going to be September, October. Round 2 is going to be near the turn of the year, usually just after Jan 1, like January 4th through January 15th is typical. Round 3, I hate even talking about it. Avoid it unless you want to lower the odds of getting into school. Obviously, this assumes that schools only have 3 rounds. Some schools have 4 rounds. If you have 4 rounds, then you can sort of slide this back. But typically, you don't apply in the last round. If there's not that many spots available, there are questions about your preparedness and your seriousness about going to school on the part of the admissions committee members. But also, a lot of times they assume that they're your number 2, number 3 choice. You didn't get into your number 1 choice. Now you're looking at that. Nobody likes to be someone's second choice, okay, and including admissions committee members. There are schools with early decision. Columbia, for example, is binding. So, yes, it will help you get in. But if you don't want to go to Columbia and you're going to feel uncomfortable plunking down $6,000 2 to 3 weeks after you've been accepted, don't do it. And yes, schools do find out there is a lot of overlap. There are conferences. people move from school to school. So especially if you have a unique name like Kofi Kankam, don't do that, okay? And you're usually going to find out within 3 months of graduating, 3 months of applying, rather, if you've been accepted. Remember, interviews are typically by invitation, and while they're the last data point that you submit, they're not the last data point in the evaluation. So, don't think if you have a great interview, you're definitely getting in. It's just them saying they've looked enough at your candidacy and saying, yeah, we should bring this person in. Let's get a 3D view on sort of a 2D candidate, via what he or she submitted. They bring you in, they get the data point, and then they really deep dive into evaluating your candidacy. So if you have a terrible interview, I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't hurt, you still could get in, but having a great interview doesn't mean you're going to get in. And part-time executive MBA varies. Typically, it's like sort of now that they're due. European schools vary as well. A lot of times it's sort of at the close of the year when sort of the apps are due, but you should look at that on a case-by-case basis. All right, I'm not going to get into this. This is a candidate we worked with. She has some issues, 3.1, 3.2. The GMAT was not great for the target schools, okay? This is being taped, so I want to make sure we get the questions. But essentially, we worked on some things, some challenges, right? She had a low GPA, low GMAT. She was kind of a good candidate, not great, not a great quantitative background. The short-term goals didn't really fit with the long-term. Short-term, she wanted to do investment banking, long-term, she wanted entrepreneurship. Didn't exactly fit. And, we had her do some things early. This is kind of the pre-application stuff. We talked about the stuff you should be working on now, with or without us. She took some courses, and it improved her GMAT score, sort of shaved down the number of activities, looked for leadership, and then basically really tweaked the short-term goal a little bit. I talked about consulting and marketing to pick up certain skills, which would be more relevant for what she wanted to do entrepreneurship-wise, and ended up getting into a bunch of schools. And while a 3.2, I think she had a 6. I think she had a 680. A 3.2, 680 may not, seems like, oh, those are good and they are good. Those are not. Those are definitely below the mean on both sides for all these schools listed here. Okay. All right. So get in touch with the recommenders before you need them. Take supplemental courses. Take your GMAT. We do have a good relationship with Princeton. If you want a 15% discount, you can either click on this link here. If you can't click, you can type that in, or you can get our website. Click on the Princeton logo. That'll take you over. And make sure you're building credibility for the future, and make sure you're doing well in your job and your community. That's really, really important to getting in, okay? We have a bunch of offerings. I won't go into detail. It's on our website. My partner, Eric, always gets mad when I do not do this, which is why I do not do this. But we have a lot of different offerings for you, different price points, $250 to a couple of $1,000, and we do have a discount for you guys as well, okay? 1906, there's actually a 10% discount, 1908, all right? So that's my early gift for you, early Easter gift, I guess. Data analysis, you applied last year, did not get in. We'll look at it, give you some feedback on what you can do better. Pre-application, if you're trying to gear up for this year, you want us to help set things out for you, sign up for the pre-app, okay? And you'll get basically half the cost you'll get back if you continue working with. It's actually a pretty good deal. We're on Facebook, Twitter, or blog. We need to get more active. We're trying, hire more people. We've got some more webinars coming up this month and in May. That'll be published actually tomorrow. And we're talking about sort of case studies, candidate success stories, what you need to do to improve your GMAT. We're doing the Princeton Review, and then non-traditional candidates. So people that have atypical backgrounds, what they can do to help get themselves into school. If you want a free consultation, sign up here, okay? Or give me a call or email me. Signing up's easier. It's gage.me/midadvantage. I think I'm booked this week, but I will be updating my schedule immediately after this webinar for all of next week. I usually do it a week in advance, but I'll update it today for all of next week, so you can just sign up. But I think there are a couple of days left on the weekend, but I'm a little bit booked this week. Okay. All right. Let's take some questions. No question's a bad question, and I will keep you anonymous. Okay. So I'll just give you your initials. Let's see. Okay, question. How important is the length and quality of work experience for MBA applicants? The quality of it is more important than the length. I'll say that the sweet spot is typically applying with 3 years of experience when you're applying, and 4 years when we start, 2 or 3 years of experience. So keep in mind when you look at business schools and they say 3 years of experience, that's when people matriculate to campus. So if you applied in June, let's just say you applied in August, and you had, let's say you graduated in 2012, you actually would have 3 years of experience, right, by the time you started. So even though you're applying August 2014, you graduated May 2012, by the time you start, it'll be sort of late summer 2015, you'll have 3+ years of experience. I will say this, the less tenure you have, the less time you have working, the more explosive your work has to be. It's almost like an airplane taking off from the runway. Like the shorter the runway, the faster the plane needs to be going, the higher the rate of acceleration it needs in order to lift off, right? And the longer the runway, the less important it is for the plane to be traveling at astronomical speeds early. So think about that in terms of your career, right? If you don't have a lot of work experience, you better be moving, you better be promoted, you better be getting new responsibilities to compete with someone who's got 4 years or 4 years of experience, because they're just going to be able to bring a lot to the class otherwise. All right, hope that's clear. Okay, sorry, I'm generating all these questions. All right, what should be the strategy once waitlisted? Okay, sorry, I know how to read now. What should be the strategy once waitlisted? Well, I think it varies on the candidate. I mean, so what I would say to you is that, and school, some schools say don't submit any information. In that case, you've got to just rely on people to help you, like maybe people you've met on campus, maybe an alum that basically can put in a good word for you. So on a campus, I can put in an unofficial good word. If the school allows you to submit information, I would go through and look at why you think you didn't get accepted. Are the weaknesses? So if you had a grade, sign up for a course. If you had a bad GMAT, take the GMAT again. If you feel like, man, when you wrote it about applying to the school, you didn't show enough knowledge and passion about the school, engage some conversations with alumni, and then basically write to the school and say, look, I'm so clear where I want to go. I looked at my application, realized I screwed up, and I didn't talk about my passion for the school. I've talked to three separate people since I've been denied. I really want to go for X, Y, and Z reasons. It's going to contribute in A, B, C ways, et cetera, right? But your waitlist strategy should be individualized to your candidacy to the school. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to get in. And that could be part of the reason you're waitlist, because your application was too cookie cut. Okay? Any resources where additional courses on finance, statistics, strategy can be taken if one is a low GPA, I would recommend you take it to the best possible school you can afford that's in your area. I always put a premium on in-person programs versus online. So go to a local, if you're in Columbus, Ohio, which is a great state, of Ohio. Jennifer can appreciate that. It's our home state. Take a course, at Ohio State, or if you're in Cincinnati, take a class at University of Cincinnati. You can't do that. Take a class to a local, a community college. If you can't do that, go online. I like the UCLA and UC Berkeley programs. Online, they offer some good courses, but lots of places offer online courses. All right. Could I suggest some courses can be taken to offset the low GMAT? I think you might have missed part of the limit. I'm joking. Look, so finance, accounting, stats, or economics. Okay. When I say take more classes, I mean audit them in a nearby college or university. And how can you show you've excelled in those courses? No, I mean specifically take a class for credit. So a lot of these schools offer continuing professional education credits. You can take a course. They offer classes to like people in their community, right, that want to sort of fill up on something or get, a deeper level of knowledge. So I'm specifically talking about taking a course for credit at those schools. I'm not talking about audit. I'm talking about going in, being with other adults, doing assignments, going to lectures, taking exams and getting an A in those courses. And I do love Ohio too, Jennifer. Okay, so would mixing community service while preparing for the GMAT be a good strategy? Or should one focus on the GMAT only while preparing for it? That's a personal question. So I would probably tell you, if you're like most candidates, first of all, your GMAT is clearly a priority over community service. If you're like most candidates, you probably need to do those sequentially and not simultaneously. Most of you would have a hard time reaching an optimal GMAT score while working and doing community service, especially community service where we have a leadership role. So I probably would at least get a good start on the studying before I sort of engage community service. Okay? Okay. Keep the questions coming. Any more? You guys are shy group. Very few such options are available in India. Any suggestions? I think you're talking about the courses. Take it online. So look at the UCLA, UC Berkeley programs. I mean, there are other ones too, like online accounting, online statistics, university, Google, like, should really come up with stuff. But UC has got some good stuff. Actually, so does the State University of New York as well online. But yeah, look at that kind of stuff online. Okay. All right, question about recommendations. Is it okay to take a recommendation letter from an NGO when working as a volunteer instead of my current workplace? The reason being admission is not certain in a business school. So the answer is yes and no. So it definitely is okay to take a recommendation from some kind of community service program that you're involved with, but I would say not to the exception of your professional workplace. You have to get a recommendation from your job. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be from your boss, and you obviously can explain that. Maybe in a place where they knew you're going to school, you get fired if your boss knew, but you can't be working in a job and avoid getting a recommendation from it completely. There has to be a really, really good reason that I really can't think of where you can't get a recommendation from somebody that has been with you there. So that might be someone who's left, who supervised you for a while, who's no longer at the company. It might be someone else who senior to you but not your direct boss, like who has an MBA, who doesn't have an MBA, but you've got to get someone, you have to have a professional recommendation. All right. I see that some schools allow applicants to take standardized tests up until the application deadline. Is taking the GMAT close to the application deadline looked down upon when evaluating candidates? No, it's not at all. It's good for 5 years. Doesn't matter if you took it 4 years, 11 months ago, or you just took it a week ago. That's totally fine. It looked the same. What else? You guys want me to talk about how Ohio State's going to beat up on Michigan? Okay, so you don't. You got more questions. Okay, when it comes to expressing why MBA now question on essays, how can we address this? Man, that is really an open-ended question. I mean, it depends on your candidacy, right? But I think why now, you should talk about probably being at some kind of either inflection point in your company where you want to make it to the next level and you need a certain skill set that you can't get unless you have an MBA. We may talk about wanting to switch careers, like you've learned all that you need to, most of what you need to learn. It's not quite as efficient. You're not learning as much, and you sort of want the MBA to just sort of learn those things so you can switch out. You may have an amazing company you want to start, an idea you want to move forward on, that you feel like you need more training for, and it's already time sensitive. And I think there are lots of reasons why. It just depends on your candidacy. But those would be some of the main ones I think you could build upon. How do you take 3 attempts on your GMAT with a long gap of almost a year? Is it, I don't even know what that means. Is it plus or minus, is it plus verbal or minus? What's VE? Plus VE or minus VE? I'm not sure I understand your question. But I don't understand the back end of the question. But the front end, when you say how do you take 3 attempts, I mean, hopefully you don't have to take 3 attempts. But if you do take 3 attempts, firstly, there's usually a month-long moratorium between attempts on the GMAT. So you clearly can fit in 3 attempts in a year. I think the more important question is, why is your 3rd attempt going to be better than your first 2, right? And so if you have really studied correctly, if you have done everything you can do to master the problems, if you basically have gotten formal instruction, done what you can do in terms of affordability, in terms of time, and let's say your scores are pretty close together, let's say it's a 640 to 660, that may be your level, right? You may be about a 650 candidate on your GMAT. So taking it a third time may have no effect. But if you know, like, you took the GMAT twice and you didn't really prepare right, you weren't in the right mindset, you were traveling, work was crazy, you definitely could take it a third time and just go all out and do better, do much better. So it kind of depends on your preparation. It kind of depends on your knowledge of your own strengths and weaknesses. All right, question. Is having a few months of community service considered a hindrance? Or is it just an impact that's important and it matters? Now, I would say that the longer community service is, the better. I wouldn't say, I mean, having no community service is a hindrance. Having some community service is better than none. I would argue that there isn't a huge amount. Someone clearly that's done, 1 year to 3 years of community service is probably having more of an impact for the individual people and or the number of people served than someone that's doing a couple months. So you definitely are working from more of a deficit. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Question, does the GMAT score depend on the demographic of the student belongs to? How do I know if my score is good enough for a top 30 or not? No, the GMAT score is an absolute score. So it's not like investment bankers from America have a different grading scale than, I don't even know, entrepreneurs from Nigeria. No, it's not the case. You can, in terms of knowing if your score is good enough for top 30, and you can definitely visit some of these schools' websites, and they'll give you the median, oftentimes give you the mean, they'll give you the range, basically 20 to 80%, so you should really get a good feel for that. Keep asking questions, guys and ladies, if you have them. Maybe my answers are not crisp enough. No more questions? Okay, I may just go get lunch then. If you have any more, ask them now. It's better if you ask them now, actually, because I know some of you will email me the questions, and then other people can't benefit from them, and also I can't get to them in the same level of efficiency. So if you have them, type them in. All right, what are the factors admissions committee members look at when evaluating a profile? They look at your grades, they look at your GMAT score, they look at your years of work experience, they look at if you've been promoted, they look at what your recommenders are saying about you, they look at how well you articulate your goals, they're making a decision about your ability to impact your peers in class, and that's really important to them from an academic, professional, and extracurricular perspective. I mean, that's kind of, looking at sort of your passion for the program. Why do you really want to go to school there? Is it because they're highly ranked, or is there something else about the school that really drives you and motivates you? If I'm working in a family-run firm, who do I ask for a recommendation? That's a good question. I mean, you obviously shouldn't ask your parents. Oftentimes we see people that ask suppliers, ask vendors. Let me ask the boss, though, who, even though it's a family-run firm, if they have, sometimes they can get around that. But I actually do like investors, suppliers, those kinds of people typically, or, clients. Those are typically the people that give good recommendations. And they seem more authentic, right? I mean, I think obviously anyone that's involved in family-run business, any of those parties have somewhat of a bias, but if those people can speak credibly with a really strong example of some of the things you've done, I think that you can get around it. Are there any courses that one can take if one plans to opt for consulting as opposed to the goal? I think the course I mentioned would fit, but to be honest with you, I think that consulting is one of those industries where, if you have a lot of horsepower, and once horsepower you can answer the questions, case questions correctly, your background doesn't really matter. And if you're in a good school, if they feel like, hey, this person was good enough to get into a top-tier school, and you can sort of do well in the cases, usually it's good enough for them. Okay? How do I differentiate my profile if I come from an Indian IT male pool? That's a question. We have to know your candidacy. So we'll be doing that webinar later, but you might want to sign up for a consultation. I can't answer that question because I don't know anything about it. All right. Is an advantage of an international certified language like PEL for French or a privacy certificate would be sufficient? That's a good, interesting question. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So if you can show certification that you speak a different language, that's good. Most people will assume you're not lying. You're being truthful about it. So I wouldn't go overboard. But yes, I think that the ability to speak a foreign language, especially one that's relevant for an emerging market, so if you speak Portuguese, if you speak Chinese, any of the sort of dialects of Chinese, especially Mandarin, I think those are clearly skills that are very much appreciated, especially if you write about them and you write about why you speak those languages and how and you actually draw the connection between how it's going to impact your classmates. Schools love that. All right, let's do last call for questions. I think that might be it. Okay, let's wrap here. Then, guys, I thank you for your time. I hope it was helpful. And you know, I wish you well on your pursuit. Reach out if we can help you. And otherwise, I'll see you guys on Beat the GMAT. Okay? Thanks for giving me an hour. Talk to you soon. Later.